to start in the beginning and just go all the way through. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah, that's not okay with me. I run out of steam. So what we're going to do is I want to read a little bit from the book of Joshua, but instead of just jumping right there, I want to make sure that you know kind of where we are in the history of things, because I don't want anybody to be lost. So there's this group of people, and they're called Israel, the nation of Israel, and they are God's people. All right? God is taking them along. He has chosen them, and he's just watching after them the whole way. So they were slaves in Egypt for something like 400 years, a very long time. And then God comes and he sends his leader as Moses. And he says, you're going to lead my people out of slavery. You're going to take them to the land that I'm going to show you. It's going to be the promised land. You're going to take them there, Moses. And so you might have heard the story of the Red Sea, where the Egyptian army is coming after Israel, and that's behind them, and before them is the Red Sea. And they think that God has left them stranded. But Moses goes out to the water, and the waters part before them. And all of Israel goes across on dry land. And then Egypt is lost in the water. And then they're in the desert. And then in the desert for 40 years. That's a long time. That's a whole generation of Israelites. And while they're there, they confront a couple different kings. And while they're confronted by these kings, God is faithful and delivers them in times of war. And then they're coming closer and closer to the promised land, and Moses is no longer leading them. It's a young man named Joshua. And Joshua is so ready to go into the promised land. He's so ready to take this new generation into the promise of God. But they know that there's people already living there, but God says it belongs to them. And so they understand that God is going to drive out the people that live there to make way for Israel. And so Joshua has to go and spy out the land a little bit. He wants to know what his first steps are going to be. And the first city he comes to is going to be Jericho. And that's where we're going to pick up the story in Joshua. So if you have your Bible with you, turn to Joshua chapter 2. And if you don't, it's going to be on the screen. But I'm going to go ahead and read through most of Joshua chapter 2. Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Achaia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. But someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land. Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk and the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you could probably catch up with them. That's the oldest one in the book, right? They went that way. But actually, Rahab had taken them to the roof and hidden them beneath the bundles of flax that she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossing of the Jordan River. And as soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Before we go on, I want you to realize something. That when God is using you, or when God wants to use you for something, or when you're trying to protect something of God's, you're going to be able to influence armies. She had the king's ear, the king of Jericho, and she was able to turn that entire army away. Isn't that amazing? Because she had God's favor in that moment. This was a life and death situation. If the spies had been seen, she would have been put to death for aiding and abetting. But she was able to say, nope, they went that way. And just like that, the entire army is turned. Let's continue. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up to the roof to talk to them. And she said, I know the Lord has given you this land. We're all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts are melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of heavens above and the earth below. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live along with my father and my mother, my brothers and my sisters, and all of their families. I want to reread something. She says, for the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. You see, Rahab in the city of Jericho is surrounded by worship of a false god. And being a prostitute, she didn't have any stature in Jericho. She's surrounded by immorality. She's surrounded by corruption. And she heard of what God had done for Israel. And God had done these things 30 or 40 years ago. So either she's a very old prostitute, or they're still talking about it. They're still talking about it. Because when God does something amazing in your life, it's going to be talked about. And so she's heard these stories, and she's confessing, your God is God. She's basically saying, I know that the gods of this city stand no chance. She doesn't say, if you conquer Jericho. She says, when you conquer Jericho. And so she's looking out because she knows that this is the true God. And she wants to make sure that since she helped Israel, she wants to be helped in return. It's logical, right? So the rest of the story, she decides to let the men of Israel out the window by a rope. Being a prostitute, I guess sometimes you need to have an escape route for when angry wives come, right? I mean, I don't really know how that works, but I'm sure that might have had something to do with it. So here she is, making sure they get out safe, and the Israelites decide to make a condition on their promise. Because again, now they have to tie up some loose ends. So they say, you know what? Our life for your life. If you do not betray us, then when we come and conquer Jericho, again, they're now positive. When we come and conquer Jericho, we'll spare you. But we need you to leave this cord at the window. Because we need to know which house is yours. It's logical. It's a good idea, so you know which house is yours. And they say, and all of your family needs to stay in the house with you. Because if they go out into the street, we won't be able to tell them apart, so we're not going to be held responsible for those who are not in your home. So they just want to make sure that everything, all the loose ends are tied up. And so as they're leaving, she tells them, go and hide for 3 days up in the hill country. And then return to your camp, because by that time the army will have returned. And so they do that. And then they go to Joshua, and they say, Joshua, the whole city is ours. The whole city. They're trembling. They're trembling because of our God. Joshua, they're still talking about the things that we did 40 years ago. Things that our parents witnessed. They're still talking about it. The city is ours. Their hearts are melted. And so Joshua and Israel, they cross the Jordan River by another miraculous event. The Lord stops the river in order for them to cross. And they celebrate the Passover. And Joshua goes up to the city walls, and he begins to pray, and the Lord gives him insight as to how to attack Jericho. And Jericho at this point is all shut up. All their doors are locked and barred. They saw Israel coming across the river. And so everything is locked down. They're basically depending on their walls to be their offense and defense. And these aren't just little walls. The walls of Jericho are somewhere between 12 and 15 feet wide. That's a thick wall. It's so thick that Rahab's home was actually built into the wall. It wasn't the only home built into the wall, but that's how thick it was. It allowed for people to live within the wall. And so Joshua is looking at these walls, and the Lord begins to instruct him. And he says, every day for 6 days, you're going to have all the men of Israel, all the fighting men, walk around the walls of Jericho. Every day for 6 days, one time. Then on the 7th day, I want you to walk around 7 times. And the Lord is instructing him, and he says that on the 7th day, when you hear the trumpets blast, you're going to shout with everything you have, and I'm going to deliver Jericho to you. And so Joshua, he tells the army, he says, all right, every day we're going to walk around this wall. I'm sure the army is wondering, okay, when are we going to attack the wall? He doesn't say anything about that. He tells them not to speak until they hear the trumpet blast, and at that point, that's when they can shout. All right, so for every day, they go around once. And all of Jericho is just sitting inside of their walls, watching, maybe even mocking them. And on the 7th day, they go around 7 times. And the trumpets blast. And they begin to shout. And I just wonder if any of them had any idea what was about to happen. I don't even think Joshua knew. But all of a sudden, the walls start to crumble. All of a sudden, the walls are breaking. The Israelite army isn't even going towards them yet. And the Lord is ripping apart these walls. Ripping them. And I can imagine Rahab and her family watching Israel pass by every day. The time in between when the spies came and when they started marching was almost 21 days. That's a long time to sit with your family inside your house. So they're watching, and then the walls start to crumble. And I could just imagine that her family, who doesn't believe in God as God, might be crying out to the God of Jericho. His name is Baal. They might be crying out to Baal. And I just wonder how Rahab is doing in this moment. Because when she was speaking to the spies, she was telling them about how God had delivered them in a time of war. And when the walls started breaking apart, I think this is when she began to realize that it wasn't up to Israel to deliver her, it was up to God to deliver her. Because all of a sudden, her contract with the Israelite men didn't seem to matter as much, because now it was God who was delivering the city. And I could just imagine she was hearing her family cry out to this other God. I just wonder if she went up to this rope and she said, I made a promise. I stood on my end of the deal, and if the Lord is merciful, then I will be saved too. And the story is amazing because she is spared. As the dust is settling, Joshua tells the men to go and attack the city, and he says, spare Rahab and her family, because she did not betray us. And maybe when she sees the men coming, she says, this God of war that I had heard about, I'm now encountering as a God of mercy. Because here's the thing, guys, when things in our life are crumbling, maybe it's school, maybe it's a family situation, but when those walls begin to crumble, what can we look to? Where's our promise? our sign that God is with us. In Hebrews chapter 6, starting in verse 17, it says, God also bound himself with an oath, so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. So God has both given his promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it is impossible for God to lie. Therefore, we who have fled to him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us to the curtain of God's inner sanctuary. Jesus has already gone in there for us as our eternal high priest forever. This is where our hope can be. That Jesus went before us, taking on all of our sins so that we could be blameless before God. So no matter what might be crumbling in our lives, God, if we focus on who God is, what he did for us, God is faithful. I have one more point, but I want to go ahead and have the band come back up. My second point is that as much as the priority was for Israel to come and to conquer Jericho, you see, God had also heard one heart that had turned to him, the heart of Rahab. And the mission to conquer Jericho also became a rescue mission. Israel didn't realize it, but Rahab had nowhere else to go. She was so far locked into Jericho that she had made a home in her walls. I don't know what your walls are. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's unforgiveness. Maybe it's just a place of pain and hurt. I'm here to tell you that God can knock down that wall too. Maybe you're trapped in some sort of addiction. Or maybe you're just being hurt. And God can rescue you from that too. Because God is our rescuer, because he finished all that we need on the cross. Because he is good and faithful and so full of love. And I hope as we go into the next song that you can just encounter the love of God like you've never encountered it before. Focus on what he did for you upon this cross. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for conquering areas in our lives that seem to be crumbling down, Lord. When all else is crumbling around us, we can look to your cross and remember that you are full of mercy. And Jesus, no matter what the wall might be in our lives, we declare that your cross crumbles it. That addiction, that pain, that hurt, that doubt and fear can no longer stay when I focus on the cross. Jesus, may all that you did for us, all that you did for Rahab, may it come alive in our lives, in our hearts, in our minds, so that we do not live with fear, that we do not live with doubt, that when circumstances are crumbling, that we remember you are unshakable. And when we feel boxed in by the walls that we put up, that we can remember that you can tear apart any wall. Lord, we trust you. And we just give our hearts to you. We thank you for giving your heart towards us. And we just give our hearts back to you. We love you,